Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to Spiggs Gaming, and today I'm going to be reacting to another Halo lore video, why the Arbiter was never affected by the Flood. So that is a question that should have been answered, because mainly in Halo 3, in the second to the last level, Cortana, at the very end we see the Arbiter having a turret gun and just going completely crazy on the Flood. That is why the Master Chief was able to leave, and then they were able to stop the ring and all that stuff. But it's weird that he never actually got infected, and it's a little weird. So let's get into it.
Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're talking about something that you guys have requested in an insurmountable volume. Recently I have had so many tweets and comments asking me to address a certain plot hole in the original trilogy that regards our good friend the Arbiter.
Yep.
Why he was never infected by the Flood despite having no protection or filter to prevent him from inhaling air that was densely packed with Flood spores. Now, to be fair, I do understand why so many people are suddenly confused. I feel like I've opened a lot of you guys up to the world of Flood spores recently, a method of Flood infection that I imagine many didn't know existed until now, and again, I totally understand why, considering they're barely mentioned once in the games. After learning a lot about spores and how easy it is to be infected by them,
That's right.
Going back and playing Halo 2 and seeing the Arbiter just wandering through arguably the most densely spore-populated areas on Delta Halo without a rebreather or a gas mask or any form of air filtration or protection probably doesn't make too much sense. So today I want to address this little plot hole inconsistency that, I guess in hindsight isn't so little, and explain it in the best way that I can. And also, after that, take a look at some of the armors that elites would wear to prevent infection by spores.
Huh.
So let's get straight to the point. What's the explanation? Well, I'm afraid to say that there is no explanation. Well, there is one, it's just not a canon explanation. Just like many other things in the original trilogy, the main reason why the Arbiter was never infected was simply poetic license. It would have made absolutely no sense whatsoever for him to be infected at any point during the original trilogy, and therefore he wasn't. Pretty simple. Now, make no mistake, I'm not saying here that the Arbiter shouldn't have technically been infected. We can't say for absolute sure one way or the other, because as far as I'm aware, we don't know enough about the interaction between elite energy shields and spores to know for sure. Now, I did some digging for this video, and I tried to find if it had ever been mentioned anywhere in Halo's lore if elite energy shields trigger when they come in contact with a spore, but sadly I wasn't able to find anything even remotely conclusive. I mean, the Arbiter shields never flare up in a spore-heavy environment like they do when they're hit by a bullet or an infection form, so maybe spores are too small for the shielding to pick up on. That, or it could just be another case of poetic license. Imagine how annoying it would have been if your shields were constantly flaring up during Sacred Icon. I think it's safe to say that that wouldn't have exactly made for the most fun gameplay experience. However, for the sake of diving even further down the rabbit hole, let's say that shields don't defend against spores, and that Arbiter was exposed to them at all times, which, to be fair, is what the games make us believe. Why wasn't he just given a different set of armor that protected him from inhaling spores? It does seem kind of weird that he'd be sent into such spore-laden zones with his mouth and nose totally exposed. Well, that's kind of the point of the character of the Arbiter. He's an ex-Covenant leader punished for his sins against the Great Journey. Marked with shame, he's forced to undertake impossible tasks wearing armor that is quite literally centuries out of date. He becomes a tool for the Prophets to send on suicide missions so they can dispose of a traitor while at the same time having him take care of their dirty work. Arguably the most suicidal of all of his missions he was sent on was to retrieve the Sacred Icon.
I never saw the Arbiter like that. That is insane.
Delta Halo, an area where many of Tartarus's brutes had fallen, and where the air he was going to have to breathe was dense with Flood spores. And yet, despite lacking proper equipment, he overcame the overwhelming odds and succeeded. The whole story arc of the Arbiter in Halo 2 and Halo 3 is how, despite all of these handicaps and despite how many times he gets knocked down, he always rises above it all and, in the end, ends up the victor. If he was properly suited with, like, a special biohazard combat harness and helmet to undertake these flood missions, it'd water down the significance of him succeeding and also would completely go against his role as the Arbiter. Him being undergeared was done on purpose. He was given armor that was quite literally centuries out of date and noticeably worse than modern combat harnesses on purpose by the Prophets. Whether they knew about flood spores or not wouldn't have changed that. And this leads very nicely into my final reason why he wasn't infected. Halo's lore simply wasn't anywhere near as established back then as it is now. One of the main reasons that aspects of the original trilogy have become sort of questionable over time is that as Halo's lore has expanded and as the universe has gotten bigger, some things that were never really meant to be explained have been, both purposefully and also accidentally. Flood spores just happen to be one of these things. They were barely touched on in Halo 2, and the Halo graphic novel that came out 2 years later was really the first thing in Halo's lore that showed what they actually did. When you combine the lack of lore surrounding spores with how famously bad Halo 2's development was, everything just starts to make a bit more sense. Even by the time Halo 3 came out, the only lore that spores had was still from the graphic novel, and the only mention that they get in-game was Artas Radum's iconic line.
One single flood spore can destroy a species.
But still, that didn't add
That
anything
is
to
one
their
of my
lore.
favorite
And
cutscenes.
to be honest, for all we know, he could have just been referring to infection forms and not spores. And so, ultimately, the primary reason that Arbiter was never infected by inhaling flood spores was simply poetic license. It would have been monumentally stupid to kill off a new main character by having him breathe the wrong air. Not that I'm saying that it's not a good way to kill off any main character in the future, that's definitely not the case.
What?
I'm just saying that it made no sense at the time. There's also the fact that him overcoming overwhelming odds by going into a zone that was heavy with spores without proper equipment and then coming out the other end perfectly okay was a vital part of the Arbiter's story arc. And when you factor in how little spores had been fleshed out in the lore at the time, it all just starts to make a bit more sense. Alrighty, so let's round off the video by just taking a hypothetical look at some of the armors that Arbiter could have worn to protect him from flood spores. What we're looking for here is any helmet that comes completely sealed. So, in Halo 3, there's quite a surprising number of helmets that could in fact negate the effect of spores. Firstly, the Assault Helmet, a reissue of elite pre-Covenant assault armor. The helmet comes fully sealed and is reinforced with aligned composites that effectively preserve the structural coherence of underlying tissues.
That's
Secondly,
cool.
the Flight Helmet, a sealed helmet equipped with a hyperwave link which allows its user to interface with ships easier. Although primarily designed for EVA, being a sealed helmet means that it's ideal for environments packed with spores. Thirdly, the Ascetic Helmet, a sealed and extremely badass looking helmet that's derived from an ancient order of ascetics, a deeply religious order of elites that post-war dedicated themselves to hunting down the brutes. And lastly, for Halo 3, we have the Commando Helmet.
Ooh,
A helmet
I like that
is
one.
issued only to those elite enough to be given the rank of Commando in the Arbiter's Swords of Sanghelios. And lastly, let's just take a look at a few of the helmets from Reach that could also get the job done. Firstly, the Special Operations Helmet.
That was really
Used only
cool.
by Special Operations Elites, believe it or not. This helmet seems to be entirely sealed, so it'll be pretty damn effective. There's also the Ranger Helmet that's used primarily by elites with jump packs, and also by elites that are needing to carry out orders in either low gravity or oxygen-free environments. Needless to say, this helmet would be perfect. And lastly, the Ultra Helmet.
Oh,
Another
those guys
helmet that
were
would get the
terrible.
job done perfectly. And lastly, I want to give an honourable mention to what is hands down the coolest piece of elite armour ever made, the Silent Shadow Armour. The helmet comes completely sealed and even has a visor inbuilt too, so it kind of works a little bit like Mjolnir. I seriously hope that one day we get to see this armor in-game. I mean, hell, maybe even in Infinite we can wear it. That is, if playable elites are in the game. 343, please.
Okay, that was stinking amazing. Yeah, it's weird that he was never infected, and I completely forgot about that one level from Halo 2. Like, I completely forgot about that one. That's actually one of my least favorite levels to play in that game. Maybe it's because of Flood. I hate dealing with the Flood. But that is weird, and I never looked at the Arbiter that way. Like, I never took it as, you know, we all know that the Arbiter was, like, branded a traitor from the Great Journey, and so he was then given the title of the Arbiter. I never saw it as that was his punishment. Like, I don't know why. I don't know why, like, it just went over my head like that, but I never saw that as a punishment. And the fact that he would be sent on suicide missions, like, that is insane. And I hate the prophets more now. Because they're such jerks. Yeah, I wish they could have explained why he never got infected, like in the games, like he never got infected. You know, maybe that's something that is said like in the future, maybe, or if it's said in like a future book or something. That'd be pretty cool. Okay, everybody, that is it for today's video. If you guys enjoyed it, then be sure to smash the like button because that'll help out the channel tremendously. Comment down below on what you guys think of this video. And be sure to subscribe if you haven't already and hit the bell icon to get notified whenever I post videos so you do not miss me playing any more video games or doing any more reactions. I will be back tomorrow with another Halo lore video. Bye everybody.